Utah and Northwestern face off in the Las Vegas Bowl, and we're breaking it down on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcasts. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's all caps, no spaces, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. My name is J2 Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by Dante Guardi of UteZones. And we're talking about a game. The last time we're going to be able to do so in 2023, the last time we'll be able to do so, excluding the spring game for obvious reasons, because it is a glorified scrimmage, until August 29th. And the game we're talking about is the SRS Distribution Las Vegas Bowl. If we're going to get the full official name right, I've just been calling it the Las Vegas Bowl. That's what all of you should call it, but thought one time I could mention the real name out there. But Dante, I know that this one's lost its luster a little bit, I feel like, just because there's so much going on in the transfer portal. Cole Bishop and Sione Vaki off the NFL. So in some ways, it's like, I think a lot of people are more enamored at the moment with everything happening in the portal, who's going to go off to the NFL. But we do love this team so much for the games they play. And I don't think we should take that opportunity lightly that we do get to see Utah in a bowl game. And I think it's one they have a real shot to win, and they actually get it done, versus the last few years. We know that hasn't been the case. So getting a bowl win again for the first time since 2017 would be awesome for this team too.
Yeah, most definitely. Utah actually lost to Northwestern a few years ago in the Holiday Bowl.
They did.
Pretty brutal game. The weather played a factor. Utah had a bunch of turnovers in the second half.
Way to start on a down note.
A little bit of a revenge spot for us. And the Vegas Bowl, Vegas in general has treated Utah fantastically since they've joined the Pac-12. They won it in 14 and 15, and obviously 2-0 in the Allegiant Stadium during the Pac-12 championship games. I mean, you can't take these games for granted. It's a big opportunity for the younger guys too to get some nice plays on film to boost their stock in regard to the coaching staff next season and whatnot. So I mean, it's a good opportunity for the younger guys especially, and even some of the older guys maybe who are looking to boost their draft stock and could maybe have one final pretty solid performance. So it'll be an exciting one. I think Utah will most likely win this game. Northwestern is by no means a powerhouse, especially not on offense. And I think regardless of what the situation is like for Utah's roster, I think with enough time to prepare for this game, Coach Whitt will have the guys pretty fired up and ready to win.
Yeah, give David Braun a ton of credit. I mean, this was a Northwestern team in a ton of turmoil going into the season. I don't think they won one game last year, then had the massive scandal. I don't think anyone expected them to be bowl eligible, yet here they are too, and they still did some nice things on the season. We definitely didn't think they were going to get bowl eligible either, since they had to win their final 3 games in a row, or not to get it completely bowl eligible. They just needed to win 2 of those 3, but still won their final 3. So ended the year strong, looked like a strong team too. And Utah obviously has continued to look pretty strong for the most part. I know the end of the season was weird because of the injuries, like getting blown out in Arizona, kind of weird when you're missing all the defenders that Utah is. Then of course also even the Colorado game, we know what the quarterback situation ended up being for that. So that was what Utah just wanted to find a way to win. But definitely an opportunity here where there's a reason Utah is favored by 7.5 in this one. Everyone feels like Utah is the better team going into it. We feel the same way too. So let's start to break it down a little bit. And I think one of the big things for this game is it is Bryson Barnes' final game as a Utah Ute. What an incredible career it's been for a guy who's only played in a small number of games overall. When you go back to him first popping up in the Rose Bowl, then the Washington State game, and then had to come in the second half of the Rose Bowl. That didn't go great, but still had to step in there. And then this year, still helping Utah get bowl eligible. It's been an incredible and wild ride for him while he's been at the University of Utah. And look, this Northwestern defense, they're kind of middle of the pack. And when they played teams like a Penn State, like a Duke, they got diced up. I think Bryson, I don't think he's going to throw for 300 yards and light the world on fire, but I do think he throws for over 200 yards in this one. And I think he makes a number of really nice plays. And I think he's got a real shot to be the MVP of this game, Dante. I really do.
That's a good take. I think the biggest cap factor to look at in this game is more so Northwestern's offense versus Utah's defense. I mean, Northwestern's rushing attack, they use a few different running backs, but none of them average more than like 4.5 yards per carry. They're not very impressive in that regard. And then their quarterback, Ben Bryant, he's a Cincinnati transfer, hasn't really been that consistent this season. He doesn't really have the it factor, not super impressive on third down, doesn't have great mobility, gets sacked a pretty decent amount as well. So, I mean, I just really see Northwestern struggling to move the ball. But as for Bryson Barnes, the biggest key for him is just to be able to go back to what he did well in his best performances, like against USC. What made him such a big factor in that win? It was his ability to like improvise and extend plays with his feet and hit guys down the field and make smart decisions while extending plays and while just putting Utah in a dice in like taking more calculated risks, I suppose, because that's what we didn't really see him do later on in the season. Whereas in that USC game, it was a lot of calculated risks. Everything looked very methodical, and he ended up just having a fantastic second half of that game. So, I mean, can he have a big game? We've seen it happen. We've seen it happen most definitely. But I mean, I'll probably say he'll throw for around like 170, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think that would be a pretty good game.
Yeah, he's done a good job taking care of the ball overall, like you mentioned, and I expect that to continue here. And of course, with this Utah team, it is going to be interesting to see at the receiver position. We saw the depth chart, expect a little bit more Caldera, and we obviously know Munir McClain's been doing his thing a little bit this year, so maybe he has a good shot to lead Utah in receiving yards. Would love to see Bryson and Money Parks, the very first play of the season, they connected on a huge play. Would love to see them do that again in this one too. And Landon King going to continue to do his thing in the tight end spot for Utah. So some solid guys on the outside, down Devon Vele, no Mikey Matthews either. So that position group takes a hit a little bit, but still I don't think any of them will light the world on fire, but they'll make a few nice plays too. And then when it comes to Utah running the ball, once again, Northwestern defense, kind of middle of the pack in the Big Ten. I do expect Utah to be able to wear them down, even down a Satal Laumea and a Keaton Bills. This is an offensive line led by Jim Harding that has always prided themselves on their depth. Jaron Kump, while not the greatest season, has started games for them and still produced at a decent level. While this Northwestern defense has a few players on it where I'm like, okay, they can make plays. One of those guys being a guy like a Aiden Hubbard, who has 6 sacks on the season too. They got strong linebackers, so I think that'll be a fun battle. 2 linebackers over 100 tackles on the year. That'll be fun to watch this Utah offensive line try to work their way up to the second level in the zone-heavy scheme that they employ. But whether it's stepping in, Tongai looks like he'll be at the left side, and then we'll have Fano on the right if the depth chart holds to. I expect the offensive line to get it done up front. I don't think this is a game where Utah rushes for over 350 yards on the ground, but I do expect Utah to go over 200 yards on the ground. I think there's a world they could potentially even get to 300, even though I do like this Northwestern defense a little bit. So I don't think they'll cross that threshold, but I'm not ruling it out of the realm of possibilities. And we do expect Jaquindon Jackson to play as the time as we are recording this. So I expect that Jaquindon Jackson, kind of Jalen Glover, slim chance of Mekhi Bernard, apparently. I'm still curious if we'll actually see him or not, but I do think that we're going to see Jaquindon have a pretty nice game now that he is playing in this one. I do expect Jaquindon to go over 100 yards, pending how much Mekhi, Jalen, we could see if those guys play. But I do expect the Utah ground game to have a successful outing. What do you see there, Dante?
Northwestern is definitely battle tested, playing in the Big Ten, going up against some pretty quality rushing attacks. However, Utah's had a lot of rest in between their last game and now. And I feel like the biggest factor that led to Utah's, downfall towards the end of the season was just the fatigue of playing in such a gauntlet of a conference and dealing with so many injuries. So having this much rest in between games is absolutely massive. I think Utah is going to be pretty energized, pretty ready to go. And I see something similar happening as to what you think is going to happen. I don't know about 300 yards like you were saying, but I think somewhere in the realm
potentially. It wasn't my exact prediction. I said potentially.
Potentially. I see between 200 and 250. That'd be nice. And I think that's most definitely a realistic number. I mean, we've seen Utah when they find their groove running the ball, when they get it going early, it's very hard to stop this team. And I think that this is going to be one of those games where we see Utah go up like 10-0, 14-0, something like that, and don't really look back. And the rushing attack kind of does their thing, keeps Northwestern's offense off the field, and just controls the game simply.
Yeah, hey, I got my Christmas hat on. For those of you that are just listening to this on audio, that is on my Christmas wish list. I want you a 300-yard game in this one. So that is why I mentioned I'm speaking into existence, saying if you're listening, make it happen. But the Utah offense, as we mentioned, Andy Ludwig's had time to dial things up, watch way too much Northwestern film, and now is going to come in with a game plan that I think is going to be effective and maximize Bryson and the skill sets of this offense. Because as you mentioned too, this is a team that did not probably love the way they ended the season and how they, even though they beat Colorado, how they looked in that one, and a great opportunity for them to get a bowl win here and send a nice message to the Big 12 too, that as a Coach Prime loves to say, we coming. So I'm very curious to see what we're going to see from the Utah offense in this one. And we're also going to dive a little bit more into what we're expecting from the Utah defense here momentarily. But first, I want to talk to you all about our friends at Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event, a la a Las Vegas Bowl. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy those bowl game tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you, especially if you're going to be in a place like Vegas where there's lots of other things to do outside of just attend the game. They have great last-minute deals, all-in-price views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets, and they have great things like flash deals, zone deals, last-minute tickets, and it's also just easy to find, not just buy your tickets, but you also get a view from your seat, so you know what kind of a deal you're getting. It's one of the many reasons that Gametime is my place to go when it comes to buying tickets. And once again, the Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So you can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's all caps, no spaces, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today or just go to gametime.com. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Also want to talk to you about another sponsor of our episode of Locked On Utes in UCCU, the UCCU mobile banking app that pays your entire family to learn about money. Kids look to parents to become more financially literate. Parents don't always know the answers. Learn and Earn breaks down financial topics into fun, bite-sized educational games like quizzes and trivia. Every time a family member completes a topic, they earn points that can occur and can be redeemed for gift cards to stores like Amazon, Apple, Sephora, Walmart, Nike, and more. There is age-appropriate content for every member of the family. You can compete against each other and track their progress on leaderboards. Learn and Earn is inside the UCCU mobile banking app, so you can play anytime, anywhere. The more you play, the more you learn. And the more you learn, the more you earn. Learn and Earn, part of UCCU's award-winning B-Money Smart Youth Banking Program, helping kids, teens, and parents have fun while becoming more financially literate together. UCCU, love where you bank. All right, Dante, looking at the defensive side of the ball for Utah in this one, this is a Northwestern offense that picked up a little bit of steam towards the end of the season, right? You know, scoring 24 against Wisconsin, 23 against Purdue, and then 45 against Illinois. Wisconsin was definitely down this year. Purdue was just not very good, and we know Illinois also had their fair share of struggles, but still ended the year in a stronger in terms of a win-loss standpoint than a team like a Utah did in terms of that win-loss column, as I kind of highlighted. But this is a game where I do feel like, even though Northwestern, as we mentioned, you know, got some guys a little bit, you talked about Braun a little bit, he's been up and down, but he did have some injuries he's wrestled with as well, so still a guy capable of making plays. Got a guy in Porter who's averages over 4 yards a carry, rushed for over 600 yards, 2 600-yard plus receivers here. This is not going to be a cakewalk for the Utah defense, especially missing Sione Vaki and a Cole Bishop as well. I think that's something that has to be kept in mind here when you're talking about this Utah team too. So the other thing I think I'll mention for Utah in this one is I believe that this Utah defense is equipped and ready to be able to go to work. So what I think we're going to see out of Utah in this one is I expect Utah defensively. I do think the front seven's in a really strong position. Then I also expect the secondary, when you're talking about a guy like a Nate Ritchie, a Teo Johnson getting more opportunities, Jonathan Hall, I think these guys are going to be able to make a couple plays in this game. I'm looking forward to seeing what this team can do, even though they're down Zamiah Vaughn, even though they're down a guy like a JT Broughton and then those two tremendous safeties. But I see this Utah defense having success in this game. Do you see it the same way, Dante?
I do, honestly. I mean, I just don't really see much going for this Northwestern offense. They have been inconsistent all year long, and we've seen Utah play very assignment sound football, with the exception of just a couple of games against extremely, extremely good offenses. This Northwestern team, and like I said, Northwestern's battle tested against on the ground. Like, Utah's battle tested in every single aspect in regard to their defense, and Ben Bryant is by no means anywhere in the realm of the majority of quarterbacks that Utah's faced in the Pac-12. This rushing attack isn't in the realm of the majority of the ones that Utah's faced in the Pac-12. I honestly think this game is going to be pretty easy. And it's going to be like a sigh of relief for Utah's defense, honestly, when they get out on the field and play those first few possessions and say, wow, we're not going to run 100% every single play and they're not going to be gassed by the second quarter, that type of thing. It's not going to be as challenging as going up against an Oregon or a Washington or an Arizona or anything like that. So I think Utah's defense is going to be more than fine in this game. They're well equipped. And I mean, even though we could see some opt-outs and whatnot, I'm not super worried about the depth. You know, we've seen some good recruiting classes over the past few years, and the backups have really taken on that next man up mentality all season long. And I mean, the final game shouldn't be an exception, and I don't think it will be. And I think Utah will be more than well equipped to handle Northwestern.
So I don't want you to give your score prediction for Utah, but I am curious, what do you think this Utah defense will hold this Northwestern offense 2-point wise?
Like 14, 17, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's reasonable and fair. I think that as we mentioned, that this Utah defense has seen a lot of tougher ones. How concerned are you by the loss of, Cole Bishop and Sione Vaki?
I mean, it's tough, obviously, but Nate has experience back there, so I'm not like extremely worried. And I don't think Northwestern is really going to have – they don't have the weapons to test Utah like that, simply put. Like, I mean, I feel like Cole and Sione's absence isn't necessarily a loss, but their presence would be a much needed boost, if that makes sense. Like, I don't see Northwestern even having the weapons to test Utah deep to begin with, so it's like not having – Sione and
600 yards don't scare you at all?
I mean, I've seen them play. They're nothing special, honestly. Like, I'm not worried about this game whatsoever, especially like given who Utah's played previously. I don't think they have the athletes to test Utah deep. Ben Bryant doesn't have the arm to test Utah deep. Safeties aren't really going to play a factor in this game, I don't think. But if Utah were to have Sione Vaki or Cole Bishop, they're probably going to force a turnover. So their presence is obviously welcomed. But I don't think their absence is going to be like super noticeable,
Yeah, I'm very curious to see the likes of Ateo Johnson. This could be his game where he gets the interception that he was so close to capturing this year. See Nate Ritchie get one. It's been a crazy journey for him since he's gotten back, right? We didn't see him at all in spring ball, still getting back up to speed. Didn't see much of him to start the year, had a few opportunities, also ups and downs too, struggled at some moments as well this season. But this could be the opportunity where now that he's been back so long, we could see that 2020 version of him or signs that look more like that exact player. And while we've seen them in little flashes, this could be the best game he's played since returning. I think there's a high probability of that too. And, we mentioned some of the new faces that get opportunity, right? We should see more Smith Snowden in this game than we've seen in any other game so far this season too. And this Northwestern offensive line, they are down their elite left tackle who is in the transfer portal now too. So that's another thing that they have to deal with the loss of. So no Jonah Ellis, sure. But how are you going to deal with Connor O'Toole? Van Fillinger have still been very productive pass rushers for this Utah team. We know this Utah defensive tackle group is going to make it very hard for Northwestern to run the ball as well. So I definitely think that it's going to be interesting for them. I think Morgan Scalley will have this defense ready to go, to your point. I think Northwestern will make a couple of plays like you mentioned too. You didn't say Utah's going to shut them out. You think that they'll get in that 14 to 17 point range as well. So it is going to be curious to see what kind of a game we're in for, if Utah is going to go out there and kind of dominate Northwestern, if this one will be a little back and forth and then Utah pulls away. Or look, you mentioned it a couple of years ago. We saw Utah pull away and then Northwestern finding a way to come back, because I still remember the Alamo Bowl. I hate to bring it up, but we saw how flat this Utah team came out. Now, granted, Sam Ehlinger is not on the other sideline over there, so that's something that's a big relief for Utah. But it's going to be interesting to see how they handle the test, because like we said, Northwestern's offense at the end of the year, they started to trend in that right direction. But when you look at them against the best teams they played, the Penn State, the Duke, all of those things, didn't measure up as well to him. You mentioned Bryant's inconsistencies. We know how key quarterback can be if your overall roster talent like Utah, we know what they're able to do with the running game as well and balance those things. I don't think that will be here because of how strong the front seven is for Utah. So I think a lot of plays will have to be made by Bryant, and I don't think he's up to par to make those either on a consistent enough basis to beat a defense like Utah. So I'm definitely feeling a similar range that you are. But we do need to say if we think Utah's officially going to win. I have a feeling I know where we're both going to go, but we're going to be giving those exact predictions here in a moment. But first, I want to talk to you about our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including the spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. All right, Dante. I want to surprise. I didn't talk to you about this before the show, so I'm putting you on the spot. I want I'll just say a bold prediction from you for this game for Utah.
I'll say Money Parks goes for over 100 receiving yards.
Ooh,
I would love to see that happen. You mentioned how the first play of the season was Barnes to Parks for a 70-yard touchdown. I would love to see Money get involved in some play action, deep passes, something similar to that, because honestly, I think that was kind of what Utah was missing towards the later end, the later stretches of the season, just missing those explosive plays from your most explosive targets. And I think that this is a perfect opportunity for Money to showcase his skill set on a somewhat relatively big stage, the SRS Distribution Las Vegas Bowl. So I think Utah wins this game. I'll say 34-14. Maybe Utah doesn't score 34, maybe 28-14, something like that. But I think Utah wins pretty comfortably, and Northwestern doesn't score more than 20 points.
I like it. And then who else outside? You said you think Bryson will play well? Any other guys you think that will really step up outside of your big money Parks prediction?
Not necessarily. I'm kind of curious to see who plays and who doesn't, honestly. I think it's all kind of up in the air at the moment. But as of right now, I'll just stick with Money, and I'll say that Utah has a fundamentally sound game. You know, this has been a team that has prided themselves on not really turning the ball over. That's what they did really well at the beginning of the season when they were 6-1. They were like top 5 in the nation at not turning the ball over, like turnovers per game. They were only averaging like half of one, I think. So they were doing that really well when they were playing really good football. So I think if they're going to play good football in this game, it's going to go hand in hand with tackling well and not turning the ball over. So I think it's going to be a well-rounded team effort, a well-coached effort, just a good football game.
I agree. We mentioned it off the top. Utah has done very well inside of Allegiant Stadium. I expect that to continue in this game. I already said my MVP for the game is going to be Bryson Barnes. I really think it's not going to be the overwhelming amount of yards. I think it's more so going to be the clutch plays, the third downs. I think that he is going to throw for 2 touchdowns and at least run for 1 touchdown this one. And I could even, of course, always see it being 2 rushing touchdowns, 1 passing touchdown, because we know how much Bryson is comfortable to run, and the coaches like him doing that because then he's also not putting the ball in harm's way by throwing it. As I mentioned, I expect Utah to have that ground success too. I do think Jaquindon gets over 100 yards now that it does seem like he's officially playing in the game, as we did see him get off the team play. And, you know, Utah Athletics is always very smart with who they include in those videos as well. So I thought that was a smart little nod. Would love to see Mekhi Bernard, but don't feel in a position to make a prediction about what he's going to do with this one just because we don't know too. I do think Money makes some nice plays in this one, but I do think Munir McClain is the guy I'm going to go with to lead Utah in receiving yards. A couple of those big catches once again. I think he'll finish around the 80-yard mark. It's something I'd love to see out of him. And I do think that Utah will do a good job keeping Bryson upright in this one. Maybe he'll get sacked once, but I feel like this offensive line is going to play pretty well against like we said, kind of met up and down Northwestern front overall in this one. And then defensively for Utah, my bold prediction for the game is I'm going to cheat a little bit and do 2 players because this is very hard to do. One of Smith Snowden or Teo Johnson is going to get a huge interception in this game. I stopped just short of saying a pick 6, but one of them is going to nab their first career interceptions in this game. And I think it's going to come in a big moment that could be the proverbial dagger that seals a victory for Utah too. I do think Connor O'Toole gets home for 2 sacks. I think Leavani Damuni leads Utah in tackles yet again. I think we feel good about Teo Johnson and and of course Hall as well at the safety spot, but Nate Ritchie too being back there. I think Nate Ritchie, as we kind of discussed, plays his best game as a Ute. And I think Kyle Whittingham and co get their first bowl win since that 2017 one we mentioned. And I'm going to take Utah to win this one. I'm going to go Utah 31. And I do think Northwestern makes a couple plays. So I'm actually going to give Northwestern 24. I could see Utah fumbling or maybe turning it over at some point in this game. I don't think it'll come via a Bryson interception, but we've seen crazier things happen before too. So I think Northwestern makes a few plays. It's a bowl game. Let's get wacky. Let's get crazy. And let's get a Utah victory. Once again, I'm going to go with 31-24, but let me hear your guys' predictions in the comments below. Dante, appreciate you joining us on here. Make sure you guys head over to UteZone and check out all of the work that he puts in, as well as follow him on social media at Dante Guardi. Dante, thank you again for joining us.
Of course. Appreciate you, JT.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes, but we'll be back with you to react to this game and talk more about the latest in Utah recruiting as it relates to the transfer portal and their latest signing day class on next week's Locked On Utes. Hope you all have a great Christmas, and we look forward to seeing you soon.